Hey guys, I'm back. Sorry about that. You know how they have a limit here sometimes unless you have a special account. But anyway, getting back to what I'm saying. We're now talking about part 2, the King Igthorn mini-series, or the series finale of Gummy Bears. As I said at the end of part 1, Igthorn, because he finally has the secret of the Jews, ends up conquering Dunwin and becomes king, and for most of part 2 is king. But why does he want to become king, you might ask yourself if you're new to the series. Well, it's just like any villain who wants to rule the world. They just want people to do what they want. They basically want to enslave people, have them do what they want. And in this case of Igthorn, he wants people to give him gold. He wants riches. That's all he cares about. Now, you might say to yourself, well, looks like no one can stop him. You're wrong. Because just like with any villain when it comes to these kind of scenarios, the heroes always come back, or in this case, bounce back into action. Now what happens is that Gummi, which Igthorn is aware of is free, goes, along with Cubby and Sonny and Calvin, goes to Usala, which is one of the Gummi capitals, and asks for Ursa and Gritty's help. Now Ursa and Gritty are Barbic gummies, which are basically fighting gummies. Basically they fight, ask questions later. And they sort of have a vendetta with humans. But anyway, they've agreed to help out. Now, on the way there, they do rescue Cubby, Sonny, and Calvin from an attack of ogres after Cubby, Sonny, and Calvin ambush Toadboard and the ogres from delivering, the Jews from Drekmore to Dunwin. And then after that, after rescuing not only Cubby and Sonny, but then as well as freeing Grammy and Tummy from a juice barrel that they snuck out in, Cubby, Sonny, Grammy, and Tummy end up going back to Drekmore to sabotage the juice factory. And while they do this, the Barbics, along with Calvin and Gummi, go back to Dunwin, free Gusto and Gruffy, who were captured in part 1. I should have mentioned that, because they were the other two remaining gummies freed until they were captured after they had captured the big tooth termite. Well, actually, Gusto captured the big tooth termite in part 1. But after they get freed by Ursa and Gritty and Gummi and Calvin, you might think that okay, together they have a chance. However, Ursa and Gritty, they have other plans. Because of the vendetta with humans, they feel as though, hey, we did our job, we helped our friends, our fellow gummies, that's it, we're going home. That is until they see with their own eyes that not only is Igthorn a danger to not just the humans, but he's a danger to everybody. A danger to everybody. For example, what I mean is that in part 1, because Gummi and the other gummies thought, it was safe finally to come out of hiding and everything, they also felt that it was safe to bring back the great gummies. Now, a message was sent from Usala to the great gummies saying, hey, Kate, you can come back now, everything's fine, everything's cool. That is until, like I said in part 1, Igthorn makes his return, conquers Dunwin and all that, gets the juice, and you understand, you get the whole story. Anyway, what happens, after seeing and hearing what Igthorn's about to do, the Barbics realize that, hey, Gummi does have a point. Because Gummi's telling him, hey, look, the great gummy, if we don't stop him, the great gummies are going to get destroyed, they're going to get killed. And basically saying, hey, if you think he's going to stop with the great gummies, you're wrong. If you think he's going to stop here at Dunwin, you're wrong. If he's going to stop with the great gummies, you're wrong. He's going to go all over, with this army. So basically, Ursa finally realizes, like I said, she goes, oh, he's got a point. It's like, basically tells them, you're right, you got a point. If we don't stop him here, who's to say, where we live won't be next. So what happens is that Ursa and Gritty, along with Gruffy and Gusto, end up going to the shore to stop Igthorn from attacking the great gummies. Now, in the meantime, Calvin stays with Gummi. Calvin goes and frees the knights. Toadwort, who is left behind to look for the gummies, but can't find them, almost tries to open the great book, gets distracted by Zummi's magic of fireworks. Zummi opens the book. Toadwort catches him in the act. Zummi casts a spell, and along with the great book and Toadwort, ends up flying on the great book all over Dunwich. And ends up falling. Toadwort ends up falling off, however, and as he falls off, he's encountered by the knights and Calvin coming, straight in his direction. So he has to escape and warn Igthorn. And so what happens just before he can get there, and just as Gruffy, Gusto, Ursa, and Gritty are getting there as well, Zummi arrives on the scene just in time to warn the great gummies, to get them out of the way, to warn them it's a trap. It's not safe. But as he does so, he and the great book accidentally are hit by one of the boulders that Igthorn fires from a catapult and falls into the ocean, assumably being killed, by Igthorn. And with his friends, like I said, Gusto, Gruffy, and the Barbics, believing that he's gone, they decide that, hey, from what Ursa says, hey, we got to basically, go where he left off. We basically got to finish what he started. And that's what they do. They finish what they start, and by doing so, end up giving enough of the distraction that allows not only the knights to show up in time to drive the ogres off, but also allows King Gregor to free himself, to capture the key, to take the key away from the ogre that's holding it, free himself, and duel it out with Igthorn, whom he defeats. And now Igthorn, who ends up now finally saying, fine, you want your crown? Here it is. I'll come back and I'll reconquer the kingdom. Takes off after that. And then we see the gummies thinking, okay, we won, but it's a bittersweet victory because Zummi, sacrificed himself for us. But that's not the case, as Zummi, along with the great book, ends up washing ashore and is greeted by the others by being informed that everything is fine, the great gummies are safe. And just at this same time, Cubby, Sonny, Tummy, and Grammy end up sabotaging the juice factory to the point that as Igthorn is arriving, Igthorn and Toadwort are arriving back at the castle, at Drekmore Castle, the ogres end up leaving, and whoosh, believe it or not, the castle, because of the sabotage, ends up taking up into the air, blasting off into the air, leaving Igthorn with nothing but himself, the Big Tooth, and Toadwort. And that's it. Basically, Igthorn ends up getting his comeuppance. Yes, he conquered, but in the end, he's the one that was left with nothing. And the gummies, as far as they go, since the glen was destroyed, end up, from what we see, living now in Usalia with the Barbics. Now, some have said, though, that some of the episodes that came afterwards, even though some were probably planned for before King Igthorn, that some of them were even after it, and that perhaps along the way the glen was repaired by the gummies and the Barbics. While others believe that had another season been added on, we would have seen possibly the repairing of Gummi Glen, but the gummies sort of adjusting to life in Usalia as well. But overall, the King Igthorn miniseries, the series finale of the Gummi Bears, is one of the best ones out there. And if you've never seen it, I advise you to go on any video site you're a part of. Type it up, search for it, watch it, you'll enjoy it. Go to a forum that you might be able to download it from. You can find it. It'll be, worth your while. Because believe me, it was worth mine. And believe it or not, this was actually aired for the very first time on the same day that Disney Afternoon made its debut. So, talk about coincidence. But anyway, that's all I have to say about King Igthorn, the Gummi Bears series finale. And up next, I'm going to talk about another series, but this time about its pilot movie, one you might be very aware of.